Servus, Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. If you have followed the news on what is happening right now in South Africa, the Republic of South Africa, then you must have noticed that it is not going so well there. The mostly peaceful protests there are so mostly peaceful that even the military, I read, is now used in order to stabilize the situation there. And I want to take this opportunity, or this after these incidents, I want to comment on tribalism because I read a very funny or interesting German article that said that all of a sudden, the ugly face of tribalism can be seen once again in South Africa. Yeah, really surprising. It wasn't there before, right? All of a sudden it pops out. Yeah. Yeah. So people in the West that are not informed, that are maybe more on the left-wing side, that see a lot of the exotics in a very unrealistic way. Um, of course, they are surprised, but people on the right who have a more realistic notion of tribalism and of human nature, should say that generally, they are not surprised by that. They cannot possibly be surprised by that because we have that everywhere. You see it in the United States. Uh, Go into the shop, take out flat screen, and run away. This is basically what they do there. And we see the same thing in Europe. Not so much, maybe, because the welfare and all these things, but and you see it in South Africa. And by the way, maybe just to clarify here, the ugly face of tribalism that these German journalists wrote about are not related to any black versus white conflict or tension. No, 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 no. It is among different African groups. Yeah, the Zulus and some other tribe that I probably can't pronounce. And let's be honest, I cannot tell them apart anyway. um, yeah, uh, this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about tribal conflicts between two different African tribes here. White people have not really any part to play here. I mean, yeah, sure, in South Africa, I guess they're still oppressed and they're used as scapegoats every now and then when it's convenient, when they want to deflect from the actual conflicts and problems and shortcomings that they have there. Then the white farmers or the white people, they serve their role. But this conflict is absolutely between African ethnicities, one should say, or tribes. So a little bit of background: there is this former President Zuma, and he is or identifies, or he is a Zulu from the Zulu tribe. And I was reading about him a little bit, and it seems that he is a very corrupt person with lots of offenses, very horrible offenses, and he was not sentenced for that, or not. He should be jailed or something, but not for all his various crimes, but for not serving as a witness in one of the cases, or not refusing to make a statement or something like that. So this is a rather minor offense charge compared with the things that he actually did, and some of the things he admitted to. But there was a case where the judges refused to sentence him because, I mean, he admitted the deed, but in front of the courthouse, there was an angry mob of his supporters threatening to harm the judges in case they sentence him. And that is a situation that is not too dissimilar, I would say, to what we see in the United States with important court cases, where juries are not sequestered and where there are threats being made and stuff like that. So once again, they act in very much the same way in a country that they actually rule. Yeah, and if it's not any white oppressor, they find another angle to be mad at someone and to be tribalist in a very pure form. And I just want to make some comments on tribalism in general now. Um, I'm a German, and Germany is a tribal society, believe it or not, just like in Afghanistan or something. Different tribes populating a common nation or a common area. So in Germany, there are Swabians, Alemans, Franks, Bavarians, Thuringians, Saxons, Frisians, and so on. Many, many different people. And we all at the same time identify as Germans, some more, some less, but maybe if we want to compare this tribal situation, we have to go back a couple of thousand years here in Germany, where there was definitely war between the tribes also. They were not living peacefully under one nation back then, in the migration period, for example. But it was very clear that they worked together in order to accomplish something, and that the conflicts between them were not maybe, how should I say that? There wasn't so much hate between them, I guess, but they wanted to achieve a certain goal. It's not like the Bavarians absolutely hated the Swabians, or if they existed back then, but maybe they had different names. Or when the Franks defeated the Visigoths, I think they didn't try to exterminate them or something. They let them live under Frankish rule then, right? This is a very important historical event when the Visigoths were defeated by the Franks, for example. And the Franks, by the way, they are also a tribe that was it's kind of a how should I say that, a merger, a merger of many, many smaller tribes whose names you probably have never heard before. You can look it up. And they then merged together and formed the tribe of the Franks, which, as you all know probably, Charlemagne was a Frank. So they then later conquered great parts of Europe and founded the Frankish Empire, and then ultimately France and the Holy Roman Empire came out of that. But that was already at all times a tribal society, but they they aimed for a higher goal. They had meetings where they discussed things, not only among themselves, but also with other tribes. They had relations, of course, and maybe it was, or pretty sure it was, the contact with the Roman Empire that led them to strive for this ideal that they should follow up and become the heirs of the Romans, so to speak, not biologically, but culturally, of course. They should continue that civilization in some way. And this is how the Holy Roman Empire of German nations came to be. And the Frankish Empire was, of course, a precursor to that. And Charlemagne definitely had the intention, or he saw himself as some kind of Caesar, as some kind of emperor in the Roman tradition. Yeah, and that was what they were striving for. And I think that they were way more civilized and way more, how should I say that? Not so much controlled by their impulses and by their anger and by their hatred, but more practical. And of course, during these times, that meant war. That meant violent things sometimes, of course. But I would say there was still a big difference, very big difference to what we see on the African continent these days. It just seems that we're fundamentally different. Yeah, and also many, many people are saying that now, that, well, one has to consider in the end what we're trying to do here is we're trying to force a very archaic tribal society into a modern democratic framework. And you could also say that in the Middle East, this is what the neocons at least on the surface level, at least what they said, what they proclaimed. This is what they were also trying to do in the Middle East, nation building and stuff like that. And you can also say, I mean, there is a big difference between Arab tribes and African tribes, of course, but also, yeah, like forcing them into a modern Western style democracy is probably not going to work. Yeah, we all know that, I guess, but it's still being tried, and people are still acting surprised if it fails, like we now see in the Republic of Southern Africa. Anyway, and we cannot say that they didn't get any support. I mean, they were given the blueprints, they were given the keys to the castle, they were given sovereignty, they were giving help, support. The whole globe was bending over backwards in order to help them and support them and uplift them and whatnot. I mean, yeah. But now people are finally waking up and seeing their true nature. That was always there. Yeah, that was always there. But people refused to look at it and they choose to ignore it. And now they're acting all surprised. Oh, well. Yeah. And maybe I also, in an upcoming video, talk about tribalism in a more general way. You know, there is modified true tribalism, because what we see in South Africa now is true tribalism. These people are actually different ethnicities that don't get along with each other, that are in competition with each other. And now in the West, where especially young people, they were trained not to follow their instincts that are there with all human beings. I think tribalism is human nature. They are maybe not bred to, but they are educated to not follow that anymore. So they come up with modified tribalism, like in football, where it still, belongs to a nation or a city or a club or something, but it's not really ethnicity or relations, family, tribes anymore. And then there is true fake tribalism, which is more Linux versus Microsoft or Google versus Apple or something like that, right? So maybe I will talk about that. So I think tribalism is not a bad thing. Tribalism is talked about mainly in a negative context. It's used as a dirty word, some remnant of our archaic past or something. But I think it's just human nature. Tribalism just means family, and family is definitely a positive thing. We should just be real, and we should be realistic about what kind of tribes, what kinds of people we are dealing with, and is there tribalism an enlightened one, like the Germans have nowadays, where we still identify with our respective tribes, but and we hate the other tribes, but the idea of going to war with each other is rather ridiculous and outlandish these days. We just have our we how should I say that? We cultivate our stereotypes and our negative stance, negative feelings towards other tribes in Germany. And sometimes it's not violent hate or anything, but it's definitely a sort of disdain, animosity, but in a peaceful way, in a fun way almost, right? We can laugh about it these days, but we're still tribal. Yeah, it's just that we work together as a nation, and or not, you might argue, but that's a whole different question. At least we're peaceful and we're living in a state peaceful together, but still tribalism exists, and it's not a bad thing. It's part of our nature, and to overcome tribalism is a ridiculous and not very noble goal, I would say. It does more harm than it helps. I think being aware of tribalism and incorporating it in a civilized, enlightened way into your life, that is the way to go, and this is what we did in Europe. And maybe others can learn from that. But quite honestly, if they don't want to, I mean, just build a wall and leave them alone. I mean, who cares? Ja, Servus, Kameraden.